Now they're recorded. And those are posted in a section that's gated for holders. So if you do hold an NFT and you miss a class, you can always go back and watch the replay if you'd like. Those are done through a wallet gating service that we have. So you'll connect your NFT, or you connect your wallet just like you would connecting it to anything else. And it'll kind of check to see if you have that NFT in your wallet. And if you do, then it'll let you watch the video. So pretty cool tech that we kind of have there to make sure that if someone is interested and the times just don't work for them, they're able to watch any videos they want. The class is not, so the core class is not necessarily like a technical class. We aren't going to be teaching anyone to code, but what we are going to be doing is kind of, giving people the tools to become profitable traders. Today's lesson will be a little technical. There's going to be a lot of kind of detailed information, and it's important because I think having good fundamentals is critical to make sure that you're understanding what's actually going on in the space, can have intelligent conversations. If somebody asks you, you're into trading NFTs, like, what is that? I don't really get what that is. Being able to have an intelligent conversation with that person, one, can be really good for onboarding, but two, and perhaps more importantly, those people can, not think of you as weird, because sometimes, when people think we're just trading pictures of bears back and forth, they think we're a little weird. Paho, I saw your bear. I'm also a bear holder. Just sparked in my head. All right, so first of all, when we're talking about NFTs, what is an NFT? Well, we probably know that NFT stands for non-fungible token, but do we know kind of what that term means, especially fungible being the operative, the most important kind of term here? So fungible basically just means something that kind of have identical copies. So when we look here on the left, we have things that are fungible like currency, gold, trading cards of which 1,000 copies have been printed. So you can think of any of those things as fungible, right? If I have a US dollar, or if I have a euro, it doesn't really matter if I have that dollar and I give it to the store owner isn't going to look to see, that's not a unique situation, right? I've got probably $5 in my wallet. All of them are considered the same. Things that are non-fungible, paintings, houses, unique trading card of which only one is ever printed. So those are very obviously things that are going to be particularly unique, right? It is important to note that when we look at this list on the left, these aren't necessarily by definition fungible. That is, if I look at a dollar bill, it actually has a serial number on it, and each dollar has a unique serial number. So to some extent, what we're doing is we're using things that are non-fungible, things like a dollar bill, which is actually unique, but we treat it as fungible for the purposes of our conversations and our interaction in the real world. Because realistically, while the shop owner that I give $1 to pay for a sandwich, well, more like $10, but the shop owner that I give money to purchase something, they don't particularly care what the serial number of that dollar is. But if we're doing something like investing a bank robbery, it's very valuable to be able to, figure out, okay, these were the printed dollars that were stolen. And so, if we see those coming up in circulation, we can make a note of that and, arrest that person or figure out kind of, how that dollar has been transacted. So a lot of these things in the real world are things that are non-fungible, but we treat them as fungible for kind of the purposes of interacting very easily in the real world. So what can NFTs be used for? And this is kind of, this is what we're kind of talking about here. If Tom borrows a dollar note from Frank and returns a different dollar note, both of them neither lose or gain in value. We can't exchange houses, though, right? Even if they're similar, there's going to be parts of houses, maybe one is upkept a little better. Maybe one has, a larger lawn or a corner lot or whatever. So things that are non-fungible essentially can't be exchanged very easily. Things that are fungible can be exchanged very easily, and we can kind of treat them as the same. Like we talked about, each dollar is treated as fungible, but they actually have individual serial numbers. You see that there. So what exactly are NFTs? Some of you in here might think of NFTs as digital pictures. And this is kind of the whole like right-click save conversation, right, that happens where, it's kind of, in my personal opinion, it's the major source of conversation and misconception, if you will, about what's going on with NFTs. So NFTs are actually digital licenses of ownership. It's the code behind the JPEG. So it's not actually the JPEG itself. And so we look at this picture of an OK Bear, right? And this is just a JPEG, right? When it got loaded into the PowerPoint here, it was just an image that was loaded in. But what's actually making this unique, right? Which is the reason that like this picture that I could post anywhere, I see there's some people struggling to join. We shouldn't really have, I don't think we should have any problems to join right now. Maybe we can kind of troubleshoot those that are struggling to get in. You should just click on the classroom, just click on the classroom VC and hop in. Anyway, so if we're talking about the token address, if we take a look here, and I'm going to copy this link in. We'll kind of explore what's going on here with this OK Bear. So if we take a look here, you'll notice a few things. So the OK Bear itself, which the image isn't popping up, I think it's loading right now. But this token address here, this EK4FIZ, this is what's actually making it unique. So what you're actually doing when you're trading NFTs is you're buying and selling these token addresses. The actual image that it's connected to, and we'll look at this in the metadata, which is going to be right here. This is going to be this is the URI, but if we come in here, we'll see later that where that image comes from, hopefully. But we have this token address, and this is what's actually being traded. What happens is in this data, you see this link, and this essentially is a link that is connected to this token. So we have this token that exists, and then this data is essentially connected to that token. And within the data, there is metadata, so things like hat traits or body traits or fur traits or outfits or whatever. All of that is stored at this link. And then additionally, the image of the NFT is stored at that link as well. So this is the piece, all of the things that some of you, hopefully not all of you, but some of you might think or might have thought of as the NFT, as well as a lot of people that have conversations about right-click saving. They think that this link, the information at this link is what an NFT is. But it's not. It's a token. It's this. This is what the NFT is. This is unique, right? This token address, this EKFIZ, that's the only, that's the only token with this address that can ever exist. And I can change anything in here. If I wanted to, I could change the link, so I could change the image, I could change any of the metadata by changing the information stored here, but I cannot change this token address. Very similarly, I could make an exact replica of the OK Bear, and I'm going to show you that here in a second with a DeGod that I've used to demonstrate this, which I don't know where the actual one is anymore. First time I did this example, but if we look, right, this looks like a DeGod, right? But this token address is not part of the DeGod collection. So even though I can take the metadata and I can take this information and I can come here and I can copy this in, hopefully. Come on. Right? And I can look here and you'll notice all of this information, name, DGod7043, symbol, DGod, description, 10,000 of the most degenerate gods in the universe. We've got this image here, and if I look at this image, if I load in this image, you'll notice that this image, this link, looks exactly like a DGod, right? But this token is not part of the DGod collection. Anyone could take all of this information that we have here, right? This is the whole right-click save argument. You can take any of this information that exists about DGods and make your own exact replica DGod. But since this token address is not part of the DGod collection, it's not considered part of the DGods. It doesn't give you access to the DGods Discord. For all intents and purposes, this NFT is not worth anything. I can't list it as part of the DGods collection on a secondary market. So this is kind of the difference. And so when we talk about NFTs and we talk about them as digital pictures, this is kind of the misconception. You can make a token with any digital picture you want, okay? But it's the token address that actually matters and actually determines what's part of a collection, what's not part of a collection, who actually owns, whatever that is, right? Because while I own this does not give me access to anything having to do with DGods, okay? Does that make sense? Any questions? Feel free to toss them in general chat, preferably, but also I do have lesson questions, lesson participation up. It is a tricky concept, and especially if you have the misconception perhaps that the image is what the NFT is, since a lot of times that's what we perceive as being traded back and forth, it's something you can get caught up on. But the thing that's interesting here is the token address, right? So this is what actually determines what is part of a collection, what's not part of a collection, things like that. This is why when we were talking about Matrica verifying and getting people in and getting people roles, I basically send them a list of all of the token addresses that are part of the collection. So if your token address is not in Matrica's system yet, then it doesn't give you the role. And so that's like kind of what's going on with the roles. That's true of any collection that uses Matrica, Grape, whatever. You send them a list of these token addresses and you say, hey, these are the ones that belong in. And if somebody makes a copycat like this, those can't get in. Another point on this, this is when we talk about places that, people can get scammed and things like that. This is how you kind of would create a scam like that, because someone would look at this and go, oh, that's a DGod, and they would trade for it, right? They'd do like a OTC trade or something, right? And then you'd get scammed and you'd be out because this isn't a real DGod. Okay, so important things to keep in mind. And I went very deep into the conversation about that, but I think it is a very interesting piece of this. If you take this and you change, first of all, you can change anything on this. It's something that I think a lot of people don't realize when we're looking at this. Anything on this page can basically be changed except for the token address. So if we look here, I'm going to go ahead and go through the information that's kind of listed here. So the first thing is the update authority. So there is a wallet that is the update authority, which means it is in charge of changing anything in the NFT that needs to be changed, or that person wants to be changed. They can change the royalty percent. So you see here we have the royalty percent listed. This is something that can be changed. Now, when we talk about NFTs being changed, they need to be mutable for that to occur. What mutable means is like literally it can be changed. There's a debate early on in the NFT space as to if NFTs should be made mutable or immutable. You'll see some very, very early collections are actually immutable, which means none of this information can be changed. All of it has to be the same. Any NFT that's mutable, any of this stuff can be changed. If you come down here, you'll notice it says is mutable, and it says 1, 1 meaning true. So this would be a mutable NFT. If this had 0 here, then it would not be mutable. Okay. And this is the address. Since it is mutable, this is the address that could change any of the information that you see here. So it could change the image, it could change whatever. That's when you talk about things like, I don't think that's quite how like Dead Gods worked. I think they did something a little different, because I think they literally had you kind of send the NFT and get a new one back. But if they wanted to, they could replace this image and things like that. The way you would do that, and we kind of delved into this briefly, but essentially at this link, all of the information for your NFT is stored. So if I go there, and I already went there briefly, but you'll see you've got all sorts of traits. So clothes types, things around the neck, head things, all sorts of different things here. And any of these things can be changed. So what I could do is I could upload a new file, and instead of pointing to this file, I could point to a completely separate file and change kind of the traits that are listed here. So I could change any traits that I want to with this NFT. We also already saw the image that's hosted here. And so if I wanted to, I could change the image link. I could change this to something else. And if I did that, then you'd have a completely different image being shown here as well. And that would show up in the wallet, that would show up on Magic Eden, that would show up wherever. So if I wanted to change it to a picture of a toilet, I could do that. Then you see the creators here. So this creator is what's called the candy machine. We'll get into candy machines a little bit later in our minting lessons. Basically what a candy machine is it's the place that the NFTs pop out of. So each of those have a unique address as well. And this is another good way to verify because a candy machine will have a specific kind of owner, or not necessarily owner, but it'll have a specific address, and all of the NFTs in a collection will come from that address. We also have a royalty address. So the royalty address, basically, this is the address that gets sent the royalties when things get traded on secondary markets and things like that. This is the address that receives those royalties. Okay. We don't need to worry too much about kind of the rest of this info. I will say that this is the URI link we have here, and all of this information that we saw at this link is also contained here. If you switch over to view URI data, we can see all of that information here. Okay, and again, friendly reminder to keep in mind, this token address is the NFT piece. This is the non-fungible piece. Anything here, right, could just be duplicated, and so it's not the image, it's not the information about the about the image that makes something unique. It's this token address right here that matters. Okay. So what is a blockchain? A blockchain is a if anyone is, I don't think this is what's going on, but important thing to keep in mind, you are auto muted in the classroom. So the reason we do that is we've got probably about 30 people in here. It would probably get a little chaotic if people were asked could talk over, or sometimes people have background noise or things like that. So that's why we have the general chat and the questions open and things like that. That way you guys can chime in with questions and things like that, and we'll let you know. Red Ross actually had a great question from 6 minutes ago that I need to make sure I answer. Red Ross asked, how do we know for sure that we're buying the right token, except going to their Discord? So the good news, Red Ross, the thing that kind of makes it easy for everyone is that when you go to like Magic Eden, right? If I go to Magic Eden and I go to a collection, just pick one here. If we go to Just Ape, Any of these NFTs that are listed here, these all have been basically, when you make an NFT collection, you send all of the tokens that are part of that collection to Magic Eden. So any of these, right? So there's a supply of 10,000 of these. So basically, the Just Ape team sent to Magic Eden the 10,000 tokens that were part of their collection. And so Magic Eden takes that list and they say, okay, if you have a token, we consider that part of, the Just Ape collection. And so in order, if you list a Just Ape, then it gets listed here because that token is part of the collection. If I had, a different NFT, if I had like a Degentown NFT, right? Like those tokens, these 8,000 tokens, those were sent to Magic Eden, and now any of those 8,000 tokens that come to Magic Eden, they know, okay, those are part of Degentown. So if someone wants to list one, it gets listed here. So essentially, the way that you know that you're buying the right token is because the team has sent the list of tokens to, the secondary markets. If you're using a trading service like FoxySwap or YA, same thing happens. They verify that information. Now that information is public, which tokens are part of what collections. There's something called a hash list that basically any token that pops out of a candy machine is part of that candy machine's hash list. So you can essentially download and say, okay, all of these tokens are part of this NFT collection. But for our purposes, something like Magic Eden or FoxySwap, basically you send that list to the marketplace, and then everyone knows, okay, if it's listed here, I know it's part of the collection because only those 8,000 tokens that were sent to Magic Eden are able to be listed as part of that collection. So if you made a fake Degentown and tried to list it, you wouldn't be able to list it here. It would come up as unverified. Very good question. Especially something to just kind of keep in mind generally. There have been some hacks in that regard of ways that people have found around it, but that is just kind of like generally how it works. So let's talk about blockchain and what a blockchain is. So it's digitally distributed, and we can think of it literally as blocks on a chain. So it's packets of information, it's blocks of information that are stored together as a group, and once the block has maxed out its storage capacity, it links to the previous block, and this forms a chain. Okay, so all of the information is collected in a block, it gets sent out, and you link that to the previous block. Okay, if we take a look, and I'll kind of just show a little kind of visual demonstration here. This is a good visualization. This is ETH and Bitcoin, but this is kind of a good visualization of how something like that happens. So you have kind of this ETH block right here that's going to be sent out. You've got transactions that are kind of lining up. Now, of course, ETH and Bitcoin work a little differently, especially ETH. When you talk about gas and things like that, you see there's these prices listed. So this one's like 52, 59, 52, 46, right? So basically, if you want to pay this much in gas, your transaction goes into that block, right? And then when the block is full, it gets sent and linked to the previous one, okay? If you want to pay less, then you would be down here, and perhaps you'd be in one of these earlier lines where there's lower fees, right? So obviously, if you're trying to get your transaction sent quickly, you're going to need to pay more gas because you want one that's like basically instantly being sent. So same thing kind of happens here with Bitcoin, and we don't need to get into obviously the strong, like crazy technical details of how this works, but this is a good visualization. These are the transactions. The transactions based on how much you want to pay. For the case of ETH, you would put them here, and they get sent out to the chain once the block is full. Okay. It should be noted that Solana does not work like this in regards to the like the fee line, right? As you'll know that there is no like varying fees right now on Solana. So if if you're transacting on Solana, there's not this like varying gas situation, and we'll talk about why that is here in a sec. Okay. It's also decentralized. So each validator has a copy of the blockchain, and we're going to look here at the Solana validators real quick. The strength of decentralization is based on how many validators are running. So if we take a look here, here's kind of a list of the Solana validators. You'll notice that right now there's this package of 27 validators, and we'll talk about what that is here in a second. But essentially there's all these validators, right? And they basically vote on, what block is legitimate. So this is the way that Solana is a little different. You'll notice that basically every validator is voting on this, is kind of voting on this 8-9 block, right? So we're all kind of verifying, okay, this information that has been sent in this packet is legitimate, and we all agree on that. We all can agree that the transactions processed there are good. We verify that as part of the chain. When people talk about, you'll hear a lot of times people talk about Solana as not a very decentralized network. What they're referring to is this super minority number right here, which says 27. That's the number of validators that it would take to go delinquent in order to knock the chain out. So basically there's 27 validators here, from Everstake to Rockaway Blockchain Fund. And if all of them essentially went delinquent and disagreed with what the next block should be, then the chain shuts down. This has happened a couple times, and you'll note that 27 is not a particularly big number, which is why people talk about Solana as not being very decentralized, right? If 27 people can kind of essentially control the life of the Solana blockchain, that isn't super decentralized. I will say that this is the third time we've run this lesson, and 27 is by far and away the highest number it's been. I believe it was 18 in April, and then it was 21 in May. So obviously the higher this number gets, the more decentralized it is. While 27 is a situation where you could end up in a situation where validators kind of go delinquent and the chain shuts down. As that number gets larger, 100, 200, 1,000, it becomes much more decentralized. And Solana's on its way. Like I said, 27 is the highest that we've seen. You'll see also that these votes will kind of continue going, and essentially whatever the last vote is the agreed upon block, if you will. We can look here at the blocks, and you'll kind of see, these are the different blocks that are getting sent out, and the hash associated with that. And there's a certain number of transactions that take place in each block, and you'll kind of see that count listed here. You'll note that these numbers are not terribly high, right? We're talking about 2,000 transactions in this block, 1,500 in this block. So this isn't as much of an issue anymore, and we don't need to get too deep into why that is. We'll talk about that in the minting lesson. But when we had situations where bots were sending, hundreds of thousands of transactions a second, and that was really slowing down the chain, the reason that was because essentially the Solana blockchain, can't handle hundreds of thousands of transactions a second, right, at the speed that those were getting sent. You'll notice it can handle about 2,000 transactions a second, 3,000 transactions a second. That's plenty, right? There aren't really 3,000 transactions being sent on Solana each second. But when hyped mints were going on and bots were spamming tens of thousands of transactions, we'd run into an issue where those transactions could not get processed in time, and then the validators, right? We'd have 10,000 transactions, 100,000 transactions being sent per block, and these validators couldn't agree, right? When we come here, they couldn't agree on which transactions were legitimate, right? And so that would essentially, if the validators can't come to a consensus, if they can't say, okay, this package of transactions is the one that we think are legitimate, then what happens is we can't agree, which means transactions fail, because if we don't have enough validators saying that these transactions are good transactions and we can send them through, then they fail, right? That's the whole point of why transactions fail. And so in that situation, we'd see the network halt to maybe 10 transactions a second, which means that only 10 transactions were kind of agreed upon by these validators, and so the whole network would kind of slow to a halt. We haven't seen that. We'll talk about, like I said, we'll talk in the minting lesson about things like bot tax and things that have been implemented since then that kind of have stopped that from happening. But that was what was going on, right? Was there were too many transactions for the validators to process in time, so they couldn't come up with an agreement on what transactions should be pushed to the chain, and so basically no transactions got pushed to the chain, and things kind of shut down. This is public for all to see, and you should know, we already kind of have gone through SoulScan a little bit, but all of that information is public. So you can do things like track wallets, and we'll talk about wallet tracking when we talk about our secondary price action lessons. But any interactions being taken place on the blockchain, all of that is public information, which is pretty cool and pretty wild. What is a protocol? So a protocol refers to the rules that govern a blockchain network. These are communication rules that all the nodes in the network agree to follow. It's how transactions are validated and how nodes interact with each other. So basically, Solana specifically we'll talk about works on a proof of history mechanic. We don't need to get too deep into what that is right now. Basically what you can think about proof of history as is the transactions can basically happen in parallel. So you have transactions being sent and validators validating those, and it works on kind of like a time clock mechanism. So the order of transactions is very important. This is different from something like ETH, where transactions are sent based on kind of like gas costs and things. Solana transactions are based on this proof of history mechanic. We also want to talk about, obviously, a few different protocols. Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana. Obviously, there's tons of other ones. But the important thing to note here is they all have different protocols. They all interact differently. All of the validators and things on these networks are processing things differently. That's good, and when people talk about a multi-chain future, what they're talking about is that it's unlikely that one specific protocol emerges as the only viable protocol. Basically, there's going to be a lot of different uses and things for things like smart contracts and different ways that we can transact, and so having different protocols aligned makes a lot of sense. Last thing I want to talk about in this lesson is coins versus tokens. Also, feel free, if you do have questions in general chat, I've certainly gone through a lot of information. So if you have questions in general chat, feel free to post them in there. If you have questions and you're in the academy and you want to post them in the lesson questions section, feel free to do that as well. So we're talking about coins versus tokens. Coins are the fuel for apps on a blockchain. Okay, so to execute any transaction on the network, the apps require processing power. Basically, to cover the cost of the power, you have to pay fees. So any transaction that takes place on Solana, right, has a fee associated with it. It might be a very small fee, but there's still a fee. You're essentially paying Solana to interact on the Solana blockchain. This is true of ETH. This is true of Bitcoin. The fees for doing transactions are in that currency. Now, when you have these tokens, okay, this is a little different. We're talking about GV, which is the token for Soul Army, or Scrap, which is Tayo's token, or Dust, which is Dagad's token. We consider these tokens. You'll hear people use the terms coin and token interchangeably, but there is a slight but significant difference. Okay, basically these are built on top of Solana. So if Solana goes down, none of these tokens can be transacted, right? These tokens are native to those dApps that are built on top of the blockchains. dApps, by the way, stands for decentralized applications. Okay, so you can think of this as how games have their own in-game currency. Very similarly, these are essentially being used by communities on Solana, being exchanged, etc. But it is important to note that these are different. I'll go ahead and just very briefly get into that since we have time. This is an example of a token, and you'll notice a few things here. So there's a max token supply, and this is talking kind of specifically about tokens, but you'll notice that this is, first of all, a fungible token, right? I know that this is a fungible token because while we have this token address, right, we have this many of those tokens in circulation. Compared to that to what we were looking at before, those all just had one token with that token address in play. This token address has 50 million of that token in circulation, right? So this is obviously not fungible, or obviously not non-fungible. Okay. So very similarly, though, this is a token address that we see here. Interestingly, we have this decimals count. Now, it should be noted that when you talk about whitelist tokens, those are the same. So a whitelist token and Dust, for the purposes of like the way it looks on Solana, are actually the same. When you see people mess up the whitelist and make it so people with whitelist tokens can mint unlimited, they've essentially screwed up this decimal number. So when you use a whitelist token, the smart contract takes the lowest possible denomination of the token that exists. So with a 9 decimal token, it would take 0.000000001, or wherever the 1 would be there. You need to make a token that has 0 decimals so that the lowest denomination would be 1, and then when you mint on whitelist, it takes the 1 token from the wallet. So if you've ever been in a situation, and this happens probably about once a month, I think, where a hyped project accidentally mints and people realize they can get unlimited on whitelist, this is usually the mistake they've made, is they made the decimal count 9 instead of 0, and so people can just essentially mint unlimited. Again, like we talked about, all of this information is on chain, so you can see the holder count here with how much everyone has. You can see any transactions that have taken place with this token. Anything that goes on is all public information. You'll notice that different to what we saw with the NFT we looked at, there is no update authority here on the SPL token. This is actually kind of up to the token creator. There's no update here, which means that there can be no more of this token ever produced. But if we look at something like Dust, you'll notice there is an authority here. This is the address that can create more of this SPL token. I believe that Dagad said they're stopping at like 23 million or 25 million, and so 27 million maybe. I'm not 100% sure, but essentially this wallet is going to keep creating more Dust until this number hits 27, at which they'll likely disable the authority to do that, just like we saw here. Okay, so similar to what we looked at with NFTs, with these type of tokens, there's an address that can essentially create more of them, and we won't get into like the command line of how they actually do that, but you can just know that if you see an SPL token like this, be aware that more of that token could be created. If you see a token like this, that means that no more of that token can be created. Titty Trump wants an idea on how to download hash lists to verify NFTs. Yeah, absolutely. So actually, I can even just let me go to. I'm trying to think of what would be the easiest way to do that. If I go here, I think there might be another question too. So here is an Academy Pass, right? It's not the image. There it is. This is just like we looked at, right? If I go here to the metadata, I can take this. This is the Candy Machine ID here, and you can look up. There's all sorts of services that do hash lists. You can also do it in the command line. I'll just use Magic Eden's interface. What you would do is you'd basically take this Candy Machine address, this BU4IJ. Make sure it is the verified one. So you'll notice here it says verified 1. I'll take that address. I'll copy it in here. And this usually takes a little bit, but after it loads, it's going to pop up with a list of all of the token addresses that are connected to this Candy Machine. So that will essentially give us a list of all of the tokens that are part of the Academy passes. Great question, by the way. It should be noted, you don't need to worry about this for, I believe Yaw and Foxy Swap and things like that, they all do this in the back end. You just have to kind of like make sure that it's like verified or things like that. Something like Foxy Swap, I know for sure, you can't trade a non-verified NFT on Foxy Swap. Like, it just won't let you. I think that's true of Yaw as well. Like the NFT that's being traded has to be like that. That essentially all happens beforehand. So you don't really need to worry about this unless you're like making your own collection or doing something like that. Any like P2P service, to my knowledge, verifies that beforehand. So if someone tries to load in a fake NFT, it just like won't show up, or maybe it won't be verified, or there will be some indicator to you that that's not part of the list. If you are doing things like there are times that people trade over the counter, like just straight over the counter, you would have to verify this yourself. I wouldn't ever recommend doing that, for the record. Something like Foxy Swap or Yaw costs very, very little, so there's not really a ton of reason to do a true OTC trade. But I believe that those all kind of do that for you. Here we see, like we were talking about, it did pop up with, these are the 39 tokens that are part of the Academy collection right now. So you'll kind of see all these listed. So like we were talking about, if you did want to, you'd have to make sure that the token that you're being traded is on this list. So again, each of these tokens is going to be linked to a certain pass, right? And of course they're all the same, so they're all going to pop up as the same. But this is kind of what's going on here with that. These are the tokens that are being traded with the Academy. This is essentially, when we talk about when I was posting and said, since there's some core students aren't confirmed by Matrica yet, we're going to open up the first lesson to anyone who's in the Discord server. This list literally gets sent to Matrica. This list of tokens gets sent to Matrica, and then they load that in their system, and then, if you have one of these tokens, then you get a roll. Since, like we saw with, this one, which was, I believe, minted 8 minutes ago, 12 minutes ago, this one was minted. So obviously Magica does not have this token in their list yet because it just got minted and I haven't sent it to them yet. So that's kind of what's going on there with that. They also, with Magica specifically, you don't, it's not an automatic process. You send them the list and then they kind of check it basically to make sure it's legitimate, and then then after they check to make sure it's legitimate, they load it in. The reason for that being, I imagine, that in the situation that an account got hacked, they wouldn't want someone to be able to just load any token in and get access to something that they're not supposed to have access to. So they kind of confirm that it was from the person that is in charge of updating the collection. Excuse me, and things like that. Very good question, though. Any other questions we have on kind of what is an NFT, kind of the basics of what an NFT is? It should be noted, just in regards to this, obviously this was a little bit more of a technical lesson, and like we talked about, it doesn't particularly help you profit in making trades with NFTs, but I think it is important that you have kind of a base understanding of how all of these things work, because it makes you much more able to have conversations with people. It makes you much less likely to get scammed because I don't think that what that person's talking about is correct or legitimate. It also helps, like we talked about at the start of the lesson, if you were having a conversation with someone, especially someone that said, oh, aren't you just trading pictures of monkeys back and forth? You can be like, no, actually it's more degenerate than that. We're actually just trading tokens that are connected to pictures of monkeys is in fact what we're trading. But at the very least, you can have legitimate conversations about why someone saving an image doesn't give them ownership similar to how you would have ownership of a certain token. So things like that I think are very important just to know, to be able to speak intelligently in the space. Make sure you're not getting scammed or ripped off. And also, you can spot if somebody's kind of talking about things and you're like, I know that what you're talking about isn't correct, then that's probably not someone that you want to follow their trades very often, right? I'd be much comfortable having conversations and learning trades from people that understand kind of how this stuff works on the back end than someone that doesn't. All right, well, I appreciate everyone coming out for the lesson. I'll obviously update the list and I'll send the list over to Magica. So the classroom will, for the next lesson, which is tomorrow, same time, that will be only for those that do have a verified pass for the core class. Zach, obviously, and the CM mod class have their own section as well. Appreciate everyone stopping by and hanging out with us, and I hope everyone has a wonderful day. Thank you so much for coming.